My daughter fainted after opening a gift from my mother-in-law on her 11th birthday. Welcome back with a new real shock story. Before we start, comment and tell me which city you're watching from. At the end, don't forget to subscribe and rate it from 0 to 10. Let's enjoy the story, everyone.
It all started on what I thought was going to be the perfect day, my daughter Emma's 11th birthday. I had been planning it for weeks, decorations, cake, balloons, all of it. My mind was filled with images of her smiling face, her laughter echoing through the house. I thought birthdays were supposed to be joyful, filled with love and warmth. I thought I knew exactly how this day would unfold. I was wrong. That morning started just like any other. The sunlight streamed softly through our curtains. I was in the kitchen, sipping my coffee, watching Emma sit at the table, humming to herself. Her hair was messy from sleep, and she looked so peaceful, like nothing could touch her in that moment. My wife was already moving around, placing the last touches on the decorations, while my mother-in-law sat quietly in the corner, sipping her tea, her eyes fixed somewhere far away. I didn't think much of it then. I should have. Emma had been counting down to this day for weeks. "Dad, it's my birthday," she had said the night before, unable to sleep. Her excitement was contagious. My wife and I wanted everything to be perfect for her. We had bought presents, baked her favorite cake, invited a few friends. The house smelled like vanilla and cinnamon, the air buzzing with happiness. Or so I thought. My mother-in-law had been unusually quiet lately. She avoided eye contact, lingered in silence more than usual. I thought maybe she was tired or stressed, but part of me wondered if something else was going on. I brushed it off. Family is complicated. I told myself not to overthink it. By mid-morning, the living room was ready, balloons floating, banners hung, laughter filling the space. Emma tore into her gifts one after another, squealing with joy. Dolls, books, clothes, nothing unusual, but there was one gift left. It was wrapped differently. Plain brown paper, tied with thin twine, sitting alone on the table. My mother-in-law had placed it there earlier in the day without saying a word. I noticed Emma pause before picking it up, her small fingers tracing the twine, as if sensing something strange. She frowned but smiled anyway. I should have stopped her. IDN single quotes T. She tore the paper open slowly, and in that instant, everything changed. She gasped. Her hand froze in the air. Her knees gave way. I didn't even have time to process before she collapsed. The cake toppled, candles went out, and a sharp silence fell over the room. My heart stopped. I rushed to her, calling her name. My wife screamed. My mother-in-law just stood there, staring. Emma's eyes fluttered open briefly wide, glazed in, then closed again. She whispered something faint. I couldn't understand. Then she went limp again. My wife held her sobbing. The sound of her cries will haunt me forever. I called 911 with trembling hands. The paramedics arrived quickly, carrying her away. Their voices clipped, professional, but I could hear the worry in them. As I followed them, I turned back. My mother-in-law was bending toward the table, her fingers brushing the gift as though it held something sacred. My chest tightened. I asked her what was inside. She looked at me without answering, shaking her head. I had no idea then that this moment, the sound of Emma's cries, my mother-in-law's silence, was only the beginning, that what happened next would unravel everything I thought I knew about my family, and about myself. Because what was in that gift wasn't just a present, it was a secret that was about to change our lives forever, and I was about to find out the truth. The hospital was cold, not just in temperature, but in the way time slowed, every second stretching unbearably long. I sat in a stiff plastic chair just outside the emergency room, my hands wrapped around myself like some fragile shell. My wife had followed the paramedics with Emma, and my mother-in-law was nowhere to be seen. I kept glancing toward the hallway, waiting for news, but the silence only grew heavier. I couldn't stop replaying it in my head. That moment when Emma collapsed, that strange look on my mother-in-law's face. It wasn't shock, no, it was something else, something unreadable. Fear, regret, or guilt. I tried to push it aside, but it clung to me, crawling under my skin. A nurse finally came out. Her eyes were kind, but her face was tense. She motioned for me to follow her down a hallway. My stomach dropped. "She's stable now," she said quietly, "but we need to keep her for observation." I nodded, swallowing hard. "What happened to her?" My voice cracked. The nurse hesitated. "We can't say yet. We're still running tests." That only made the silence worse. I felt trapped between fear and confusion. I turned toward the waiting area, And there she was, my Mudnell sitting in the corner, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on nothing. I could feel her watching me. I walked over. "What's in the gift?" I asked softly, my voice low. She looked up at me, and for the first time all day, her eyes were wet. "You're not ready to know," she whispered. Her voice was fragile, almost a plea. "I need to know." Emma could be. My voice broke. She shook her head. "It's not about what she could be. It's about what you need to see. But Alec, you might not be ready." Her words made no sense, but I didn't have time to question them. I felt pulled forward by some invisible force, the need to understand, to protect my daughter. I followed her down another hallway toward a small, quiet room. She carried the gift, the one that had caused all of this, with both hands like it was a heavy burden. When she placed it on the table, I noticed how her fingers trembled. I reached for it, but she stopped me. "Wait," she said, her voice breaking. "You need to hear this first." She took a deep breath, her eyes locked on mine. "That gift, it's not just a present, it's a story. A story I should have told years ago. A story about a child who suffered in silence. A story that somehow followed us, and found its way to Emma." My chest tightened. I wanted to demand answers, but something in her voice kept me silent. She slowly untied the twine, and unfolded the plain brown paper. Inside was a small wooden box, old and worn, the surface scratched as if it had been handled hundreds of times. My mother-in-law opened it carefully, revealing something hidden inside, letters folded neatly, yellowed with age, and a photograph. I took a step closer, my breath catching. The photograph showed a little girl. She looked almost exactly like Emma. My heart pounded. I glanced up at my mother-in-law, who avoided my eyes. "These letters," she said softly, "they tell a truth I buried for decades. But Alec, you need to understand it before it's too late." Her words hit me like a stone in the chest. My mind spun with questions. Why had she kept this hidden? What did it have to do with Emma collapsing? And what was this truth she said was coming? But before I could speak, a sudden sound came from down the hall, a soft, urgent cry. My heart stopped. It was Emma. I froze. My mother-in-law grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight, desperate. "Don't open that door," she said. Her voice was trembling. I didn't know whether to listen or run. I just knew one thing: something was happening inside that room. Something I was about to discover, whether I wanted to or not. And I was terrified, because whatever was waiting behind that door wasn't just about Emma anymore. It was about all of us. The hallway felt colder now, like the air itself was holding its breath. My hand still tingled where my mother-in-law had gripped it, her warning hanging in my mind. I stared at the door ahead, the one leading to Emma's room. Somewhere beyond it, my daughter was crying. The sound was soft, fragile, but enough to pull me forward. My mother-in-law stepped closer, placing her hand over mine. "Alec, please," she said, her voice almost breaking. "If you open this door before you understand, you'll never be able to undo what you see." I wanted to yell at her, to push past her hand and run inside, to hold my daughter and make sure she was okay. But instead, I hesitated. My heart was pounding so hard I thought she might hear it. My mind kept going back to the wooden box she had placed on the table, the photograph of that little girl, Emma's double. The unanswered questions clawed at me. I took a shaky breath and stepped away from the door. My mother-in-law sighed softly and guided me to the chair beside the box. She sat down heavily, folding her hands in her lap. Her eyes never left me. "You have to listen, Alec. This story, it started long before Emma was born." She began quietly, almost in a whisper, telling me about her own childhood, how she had grown up in a small, forgotten town, how her family had carried secrets they never spoke of, how there was a child in her past, one who had been silenced, hidden away because of things too painful to say aloud. She told me about letters written in the dead of night, about names erased from memory, and promises made that were never kept. I stared at her, trying to process everything. My mind felt like it was spinning out of control. I wanted to stop her, to demand answers, but something in her voice was pulling me in deeper. She reached for the letters in the box. "These were hidden for a reason. They carry a truth about that child, and about you." My throat tightened. "About me," I whispered. She nodded, her eyes wet. "Yes, because Alec, you and Emma are connected to her story in ways you can't imagine. And that gift, what happened today, it was meant to bring the truth to light." I felt a wave of dread wash over me. My thoughts went to Emma lying in that room, the sound of her cries echoing in my head. I didn't understand what was happening, but I knew my life had changed forever. Suddenly, the sound stopped. The hallway was silent again. My stomach sank. I looked toward the door. My mother-in-law's voice broke through my thoughts. "It's time, Alec. You need to see." She stood and stepped toward the door. Her hand hovered over the handle for a long moment before pulling it open. A rush of light came through the crack, and then, nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. Emma was lying there, pale, her small body trembling. Her eyes were wide open now, staring at something I couldn't see, and beside her was a shadow thin shifting, almost like smoke. It moved with her. Closer, closer. My breath caught in my chest. I ran to her side, but my mother-in-law stopped me. "Alec," she said softly, almost pleading, "you need to understand what's coming before you reach her." I looked at her, confused and terrified. "What is happening? Tell me." She shook her head slowly. "It's not something I can explain in words, but it's why the gift was given, and why your daughter fainted. There's a story here that will change everything you think you know about your family, and about who you are." I wanted to scream. I wanted answers. But there was something in her eyes, a mix of fear and sorrow, that made me pause. And in that silence, I realized one thing for certain. This was no ordinary accident. This was something far bigger. Something I wasn't ready to face. But I had no choice. Because Emma's life, and the truth, were waiting for me inside that room. The door creaked open slowly, like it was protesting, revealing a sight I'll never forget. My heart slammed in my chest, and a cold knot of fear wrapped itself around me. Emma was there, lying on the hospital bed, her small body, pale and trembling. Her breathing was shallow, and her eyes weren't focused on me. They were fixed somewhere beyond, wide and shining with something I couldn't name. Beside her bed, the shadow lingered, a dark shape that seemed almost alive. It moved slowly, curling around Emma like smoke in water. It wasn't solid, but it wasn't gone either. My stomach turned, and I wanted to run to her, but my mother-in-law's hand stopped me again. "You have to watch," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's part of what you need to understand." I didn't want to watch. I wanted to shield her, to take Emma in my arms and leave, but something deep inside told me this moment was the reason we were here. So I stayed. By my mother-in-law stepped forward and opened the wooden box again. From inside, she pulled out a letter, yellowed and fragile, and held it over Emma, as if offering a prayer. She began to read aloud, her voice breaking as she spoke. The words were strange, almost like an old poem, filled with sorrow and pleading. I couldn't make sense of them, but the moment she spoke them, the shadow above Emma began to twist. As though reacting to the voice, Emma whimpered softly, and then something strange happened. Her body went still, her chest rose and fell slowly, and the shadow began to fade, pulling back, dissipating into nothing. But before it vanished completely, I thought I saw her face. A face like Emma's, but older, sad, silent. My mother-in-law lowered the letter, and looked at me with tears in her eyes. "That was her," she said softly. "The girl in the photograph. The one who should never have been forgotten. She's part of your story, Alec, and she followed Emma here to tell it." My mind spun. What was she saying? Was this real? My thoughts were interrupted by Emma's sudden cry. She woke, gasping, her small hands clutching my arm. I gathered her instantly, holding her close as tears streamed down my face. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice trembling. It was so scary. I hugged her tighter, my own fear melting into relief. "It's okay now, baby, Mummy's here." But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. That shadow, that story, it still lived in us. I looked at my mother. "Why didn't you tell me? Why now?" Her eyes were filled with pain. "Because the truth isn't something you can force. It comes when it's ready. And Alec, it's ready now. You need to know who we are, where we come from, and what we've carried for generations." I held Emma against me, still trembling. I didn't understand, but a part of me felt like I was standing on the edge of something much bigger, something I couldn't walk away from. And in that moment, I knew the truth would change everything. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about Emma, and about myself. Because the story in that box wasn't just a story about the past, it was a warning for the future. I carried Emma out of that room, still holding her close, my heart pounding like a drum. I couldn't stop. My legs felt weak, but somehow I kept moving. Behind us, my mother-in-law closed the door slowly, as if shutting away something dangerous, something I wasn't ready to look at again. We stepped into the quiet hallway. The air felt heavier now, like it carried a memory that wouldn't let go. I looked down at Emma, Her breathing was steady, but her eyes were wide, still trembling. I whispered softly to her, "It's okay now, baby. Mommy's here." She clung to me, and I felt her little hands pressing against my chest, as if trying to anchor herself. But deep inside, I knew I was the one who needed anchoring now. My mind was racing, replaying everything my mother-in-law had said, the letters, the shadow, the words she read. Was this some kind of family curse? Or something deeper, something I was born into without knowing? We made our way back to the living room. My mother-in-law sat quietly, her face pale but calm, as if she had been waiting for this moment for a long time. I sank into the chair opposite her, Emma in my arms. The silence between us was heavy, full of unspoken truths. Finally, she spoke. "Alec, what happened tonight isn't just about Emma fainting. It's about a story we carried for decades, a story of pain, loss, and voices that were silenced. It was meant to be buried, but some stories find a way to return. That's why the gift was given. That's why Emma fainted was a call to remember, a call to understand." I looked down at Emma, sleeping peacefully now, her tiny chest rising and falling. Tears filled my eyes. "But what does this mean for us? For our future?" She looked at me steadily. "It means you need to carry the truth forward, Alec. Tell it, even if it hurts, even if no one believes you, because the silence is what gives pain its power." I felt a strange calm wash over me, a mix of fear and resolve. I didn't understand everything yet, but I knew one thing for certain: I could never ignore this. I could never go back to pretending nothing happened. That night, as I sat holding Emma, I realized this story wasn't just ours. It belonged to every voice that was ever silenced, every injustice that was never spoken of, every truth that was hidden away. And I knew that my life had changed forever. Because some truths, once uncovered, cannot be hidden again. So I ask myself now, and I ask you too, how many stories like this are still waiting to be told? And how many more times will we ignore them before we finally listen?